Hi everybody, my name is Bob Iaccino. With me today is Tim Larason, Chief Technology Officer for Lime Execution. Hey Timmy, it's good to see you again. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here.
So Tim, let's start with what you do at Lime and tell us about your background.
Sure. I mean, I've been in fintech for pretty much my whole career. I had a brief stint in ad tech, but predominantly where I've worked for small firms, large firms, bulge bracket firms, large broker dealer firms, retail side as well as institutional. Most of my experience has been in high throughput, scalable trading systems. So I've seen a lot. I've seen what works well, what doesn't work well, and I'd like to consider myself fairly advanced in that area.
Yeah, it sounds like you're advanced. So what specific role do you have at Lime Execution now?
So at Lime Execution, I'm the Chief Technology Officer. I've been there for about a year. When I joined, it was right around the time that we brought over Lime Brokerage and we acquired the technology and the client base. Predominantly, my responsibilities are maintaining, enhancing, expanding that core offering, making sure we cater to the traditional Lime client base, which is your high frequency, low latency traders. But more importantly, or actually equally importantly, we're also looking at bridging that technology that's traditional for the institutions over into the retail space. We feel that there's a lot of lessons learned, a lot of tricks of the trade that have been applied to the institutional business that can also be applied to the retail side as well.
Okay, so you're the guy to talk to then because I have questions about latency and how that affects retail institutions, quants. Does a typical retail trading firm focus a lot of attention on latency?
So I'd say that's a complicated answer. Right? The short answer is no, but there's a bit of yes sprinkled in there. Retail systems traditionally focus more on features, stability, breadth of functionality. I mean, they have a lot of clients. You're dealing with millions and millions of clients, and all of those clients have their own little nuanced behaviors. So traditionally, latency, I wouldn't say it's the main driving factor. Everyone wants performance solutions, but order latency is more of an afterthought at retail. I mean, I'm speaking generally here. There are specific cases where that's not necessarily true, but I mean, I can tell you that I can't tell you how many times that from retail product folks, I've heard phrases like, most of our clients are mom and pop, and they don't really care about how quickly the order gets executed, or our clients are traditionally on mobile phones. So why does speed matter? That's your traditional retail client base. So on the other end of the spectrum, you have your high frequency trading firms like Lime's traditional client base. To them, latency is everything. Their models are driven by speed, and they deal in the more in the nanosecond range. And right in between are your traditional active retail traders, which is where we're here at Lime, we're trying to focus a bit more so on.
All right, so I'm going to put a diagram up on the screen, and it's important to note that the information we're going to show here is directly from brokerage firms' websites. So to your point, if I'm reading you correctly, you're saying that latency and speed can be a cost in certain situations. So can you go over what this diagram says and what it can or does mean in terms of, let's say, performance?
Absolutely. I mean, I'd say the diagram it's really highlighting the time it takes in seconds between when a client submits an order to when it gets executed by the street. And if you look at that diagram, you'll see 0.04. That's roughly about 40 microseconds, or 40 milliseconds, or 0.09 is roughly about 90 milliseconds. They're right in roughly the same order of magnitude, but then you sprinkle in the Lime execution where you're talking in the micro range, which is vastly different. So why is this important, right? I mean, everything has a cost in trading. The closer you can get to the exchange, the quicker you're going to get executed, and the more likely you'll get done at the price point you want. When you're staring at a screen and you see a certain quote that's displayed, you want that quote. You don't want to submit an order and wait many, many seconds to get executed. So latency is important. And it's not just latency, it's the simplicity of the stack. The simpler your technology is between the point of time that you submit an order to the point of time that you hit the exchange, the more performant you're going to be. When you want to do something, when you want to buy something, you don't want to wait seconds for it to happen. You want it to go now. So the more active you are in trading, I'm going to say the more important latency becomes. It's not for everyone. It's not necessarily the end all driving factor, but as you become more active, the more important latency contributes to your overall performance.
All right, so you mentioned the high level of technology, the value of the technology. Does this help also with outages that can happen?
Absolutely. I mean, simplicity is everyone's friend. I mean, the simpler the technology stack, the less the number of components between point A and B, the less the number of hops, the less things that can break. I mean, resiliency is paramount. Everyone spends millions of dollars on making sure that their systems are resilient. I mean, that is arguably the most important feature of any solution or any product that's out there. But that being said, is you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have resilient solutions that do have minimal and simple footprints. It just requires a bit more involved engineering.
All right, so it's a technology question. So what are some of the factors or priorities that impact latency, and why do firms stress certain things over other things?
Sure. I'd say just first off, just to reiterate stability is paramount, right? So firms do spend money on stability, and you need to make sure that your systems are stable and that you know have your high uptime and your high resiliency. Latency then, when it enters into the spectrum, it's a gradient, right? At one end, you have clients that just care about execution. They're not as sensitive to movements in the market. At the other end, you have your more high frequency traders that you know a small nanosecond delay can have a massive impact. And this is traditionally where Lime plays, but we're moving more to the left towards that center zone, which is where you have your traditional active retail traders. There are costs associated with all this, so you need to look for firms that cater to something that provides you a performance solution, but with as minimal cost as possible. I feel that with all the discussion on PFOF or payment for order flow and its impact on retail traders, firms are spending more and more time looking at latency and looking for ways that they can improve the performance for their clients and make things quicker, because it's become more of a contributing factor to a performance of a client's orders.
All right, so the firms are aware of it. So how does a client know or research or even ask the right questions in terms of latency? In other words, are there times where maybe a client's success or failure is dependent on or due to high latency and they may not know, and how should they look into it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think first you need to know what contributes to latency. I think that's people, I wouldn't call them ignorant, but they're not necessarily aware of all the factors. First, you start off with geography, right? Where are the data centers located? What's a path and where it takes between the time you click submit and the time it gets to the market? How many network components are involved? Who's your ISP? Who's your networking provider? All of those things contribute to the speed that it takes. I mean, light only goes so fast. So if you have a data center in one location in a country and the market's in another location, it's going to take time to get between the 2 points, right? And then I'd say once you understand the geography components, it's the complexity of the technology. I mean, how many hops is it going through? How do they achieve resiliency? Does resiliency contribute to slowing down orders? Is there replication involved? I mean, all this complexity that's involved. I personally feel strongly that the more complex the system, the more you're going to have to worry about latency, the more that there's a potential for latency for things to be slower. And then I think that what's arguably the most underserved is transparency, right? Is firms that provide transparency into their flow, that can show you the post-trade metrics around hop-by-hop latencies, that can give you reports that show you how your order was impacted from the time that you submitted to the time it hit the market. That's important, because that's them being a little bit more open kimono and showing you, what's going on within their systems. I mean, that's your traditional execution. When you get into things like intelligent execution, so that's stuff like smart routers, I'd say fill rate's a good metric that needs to be monitored. The higher the fill rates, the less information that's leaked to the markets, the less slippage there is. All those factors contribute, and all those factors are good metrics to measure your performance and the overall contribution of latency. Ultimately, it's the quickest to the market, discloses the least amount of information, and grabs the most liquidity. I mean, that's the underlying basic truth.
That's interesting to hear you talk about transparency. I don't hear that a lot in interviews that I do. So clearly reliability matters for everybody. Speed matters for some, maybe not all, but some. Who should it matter to? I mean, with such disparity in speed between the different brokerage firms, is it just not a focus, or do you feel people are not aware that in some cases this could be a hidden drain on alpha in their strategies?
So, like I was alluding to before, I think it's a gradient. I mean, at the end of the spectrum that is high frequency, I mean, it's already mattering to them. They're already very conscious of the contribution of even a nanosecond hop. Where I think people aren't necessarily as aware are your traditional active retail trader. They're not aware of the factors that contribute. They don't know where the data centers are at the brokerage that they're using. They don't know that when they submit an order that there's not instant execution, that maybe it's disclosing their hand to the market. There's increasing awareness, I think, and there's increasing, as they become more and more educated, they start to realize what contributes to the slowness of their order and how that impacts their overall alpha and their overall performance. I think another obvious area, like I mentioned before, is when you get into those execution systems around smart routers, disclosing information to the street. It's a competition. Everyone's fighting for the same prices. So you want to be the person that is as fast as possible, that when you want to buy Microsoft at price X, you can buy Microsoft at price X, or whatever it happens to be, whatever security. So latency is becoming more and more important for that active retail trader. I'd say the more often you trade, the more important it is. For the moms and pops out there, I personally think it's important, but it comes down to cost. Oftentimes, having things that are more performant may have a little bit of a higher cost associated with them, but that's something that an individual is going to have to weigh themselves.
Tim Larason, Chief Technology Officer at Lime Execution. Thank you so much for being here, man. That was great. I really appreciate it.
Really appreciate you having me. Thank you so much.
And I want to thank you guys for watching this interview. If you want to see more videos like this, please like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm Bob Iaccino, and I'll see you next time.